There is something happening in your life right now that you have been calling a curse, and I need you to stop. Not because your pain isn't real. It is. Not because your struggle isn't heavy. It is. But because what you've been calling a curse, God has been calling something else entirely. And until you understand the difference, you will keep praying for the wrong thing, waiting for the wrong answer, and misreading every single sign that God has been sending you. Here is what most people believe. If God loves you, your life should be easier. If you are blessed, things should be going well. If you are walking with God, the road should be smoother than the road of people who aren't. That belief, right there, is the thing that has been stealing your peace. Not your circumstances. Your belief about what your circumstances mean. Padre Pio of Pietrelcina carried wounds in his hands, his feet, and his side for 50 years. 50 years of physical suffering. 50 years of bleeding. 50 years of being mocked by doctors who said it was a psychological condition. 50 years of being investigated by the church he loved. 50 years of restrictions, suspicions, and misunderstandings. And do you know what Padre Pio said during all of that? He didn't say God had abandoned him. He said God had chosen him. He didn't beg for the suffering to stop. He asked for the grace to carry it well. Because he understood something that most people never learn, that the presence of pain in your life is not evidence of God's absence. In many cases, it is evidence of something far more serious. It is evidence that God is working. And in this video, I am going to show you 5 signs, 5 specific, recognizable signs, that prove God is actively present in your life right now. Not in spite of what you're going through. Because of it. Stay until the 5th sign. Because the 5th sign is the one most people walk away from when they hear it. Not because they don't understand it, but because it asks something of them that they are not sure they are willing to give. And if that makes you want to leave right now, that reaction is already the beginning of your answer. Before we go further, if this channel has been bringing you closer to God, bringing you clarity in moments of confusion, bringing you the kind of truth that doesn't just make you feel good, but makes you stronger, then subscribe right now. Because what's coming in the next few weeks is going to go even deeper, and you don't want to miss it. Now, let's begin. You have been taught that blessing looks like a smooth road, a healthy body, a stable income, a family without conflict, a life where things work out. And because your life doesn't always look like that, or maybe it rarely looks like that, you have quietly begun to wonder if you are on the wrong side of God's attention. I want to address that voice directly. That voice that says, if God really loved you, this wouldn't be happening. That voice is not wisdom. That voice is not discernment. That voice is the single most destructive belief a person of faith can carry, because it takes every hard moment and turns it into evidence against God, when the truth is the exact opposite. The first sign that you are blessed is this. Your pain has not made you bitter. Think about that carefully, because it's easy to misread. I'm not talking about whether you've been sad. I'm not talking about whether you've cried. I'm not talking about whether you've asked God why, out loud, or in the silence of 3 in the morning when no one could hear you. All of that is human. All of that is permitted. All of that is even, in a strange way, sacred. What I am talking about is something different. I am talking about whether your pain has turned you cold, whether it has made you close your hands, whether it has made you stop praying, or whether, in spite of everything, you are still here, still seeking, still reaching. Because here is what most people do not understand about bitterness. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't knock on your door and say, "Hello, I am bitterness, and I have come to destroy you." It arrives quietly, disguised as exhaustion, disguised as realism, disguised as, "I'm just being honest about how life works." And the moment a person crosses that line, from wounded to bitter, something closes inside them that is very difficult to reopen. But you haven't crossed that line. How do I know? Because you're here. Because you're still looking for answers. Because you're still asking whether God is present, which means you still believe, somewhere deep inside, that His presence matters. A bitter person doesn't ask if God is present. A bitter person has already decided the answer is no. So if you are still asking, if you are still showing up, that itself is a sign. Now here is the practice that comes with this sign, because knowing it is not enough. Every time that voice says, "God has forgotten you," you do not argue with it. You do not try to reason your way out of it. You simply do this. You name one moment, just one, where God's presence was undeniable in your life. One moment, and you hold it. not because it erases the pain, but because it anchors you to a truth that is stronger than the current feeling. This is not positivity. This is spiritual discipline. And yes, it will cost you something. Because some days, finding that one moment is the hardest work you will do. But that work is exactly where the blessing lives. Now, before I move to the second sign, I need to tell you something. Because the second sign is going to be uncomfortable for some of you. And I say that not to warn you away from it. I say it so that when you feel the discomfort, you don't assume it means something is wrong. The discomfort means something is right. It means the truth landed. Stay with me. The second sign that you are blessed is this. You still obey even when you don't see results. This one is hard, because obedience without results feels like foolishness. Let me be direct about something. There is a version of faith that is actually just a transaction. You pray, God answers. You give, God returns. You sacrifice, God rewards. And that version of faith works, until it doesn't. Until you pray and nothing changes. Until you give and things get worse. Until you sacrifice and the silence on the other end is deafening. And then what? Most people, at that point, quietly renegotiate their relationship with God. They don't leave entirely. They just reduce their investment. They pray less fervently. They give less generously. They obey selectively. The easy parts, the comfortable parts, the parts that cost them nothing. And they tell themselves this is maturity, that they've grown out of the naive version of faith. But here is what is actually happening. They have replaced faith with management. They are no longer following God. They are managing their risk. Padre Pio was forbidden by the church from saying public mass for 2 years. 2 years. Imagine that. A priest, forbidden from celebrating the sacrament he had dedicated his life to. No explanation that satisfied him. No timeline he could plan around. Just stop. He didn't leave. He didn't protest publicly. He didn't say, after everything I've given, this is how I'm treated? He obeyed. In private. In silence. In complete obscurity. And later, much later, it became clear that those 2 years were not punishment. They were formation. They were the period in which God was doing something in Padre Pio that could only be done in silence and restriction. The same is true for you. That thing in your life that feels like a door closed. That season where you are doing the right things and seeing no result. That is not God ignoring you. That is God working in a register you don't have access to yet. The practice here is one sentence. One sentence that you speak, out loud, not in your head, when the results are invisible. I trust the process even when I cannot see the product. Say it like you mean it. Say it even when you don't. Because obedience is not a feeling. It's a decision. And every time you make that decision without evidence, you become someone who can be trusted with more. That is the economy of the kingdom. And most people never break into it because they leave before the return arrives. Now I want to ask you something. And I want you to answer honestly. Not to me, but to yourself. How many times have you obeyed God at a cost to yourself? How many times have you done the right thing when the wrong thing would have been easier? How many times have you stayed faithful in a season where faithfulness looked like losing? If your honest answer is more times than I can count, then you are not failing at faith. You are living it. There is a woman I want to tell you about. I'm not going to use her real name, but the situation is real, and I have her permission to share it. She came to me after years of what she described as spiritual numbness. She had been a believer her entire life. Baptized as a child, raised in the faith, married in the church. She prayed daily. She went to Mass every Sunday without fail. She tithed faithfully even in months when it was genuinely difficult. And then her marriage fell apart. Her husband left. Not for another woman. He just left. Said he didn't believe anymore. Said the life they had built felt like a cage. Walked out on 11 years and 2 children and never came back. For 3 years after that, she continued to do everything she had always done. She prayed. She went to Massachusetts. She gave. She obeyed. And she felt absolutely nothing. No consolation. No sense of presence. No moment where God seemed close. Just silence. Long, heavy, expensive silence. She told me, Rabbi Yosef, I started to wonder if I had imagined all of it. If the faith I grew up with was just a story, I told myself to feel less alone. Because if God was real, and if he saw what I was going through, why wouldn't he at least let me feel something? And I told her this. The silence of God is not the same as the absence of God. And in fact, in the entire history of the saints, there is not one account of deep spiritual formation that did not pass through a long, disorienting season of divine silence. St. John of the Cross called it the dark night of the soul. Padre Pio wrote letters describing periods of interior emptiness so severe that he questioned whether he had ever truly known God. Mother Teresa, the woman who gave her life to the poorest of the poor, wrote in her private journals of decades where she felt no spiritual consolation whatsoever. These were not people who had fallen away from God. These were people in whom God was doing his deepest work. Because here is the third sign that you are blessed. God has allowed your comfort to be taken so that your faith could become real. This is the sign most people run from, because it reframes suffering not as the absence of blessing, but as the very mechanism of it. And that requires something from you that is genuinely difficult. It requires you to trust a God you cannot feel, not a God you've decided to believe in intellectually, not a God you follow because it's what your family did, not a God you reference in moments of crisis, a God you trust, actively, daily, at cost, when every sensory signal tells you he is nowhere near. That woman I told you about, after 3 years of silence, she did not have a dramatic encounter. She did not wake up one morning with a vision or a word from the Lord. What happened was quieter than that, and in some ways more powerful. She was sitting in Mass one Sunday, just another Sunday, no different from the hundreds before it, and in the middle of the homily, a sentence landed in her with a weight she hadn't expected. The one who trusts in darkness has already decided who God is. She told me she didn't even fully understand it in the moment, but something in her chest shifted. Not healed, shifted, like a bone that has been out of place and finally begins to move toward where it belongs. That shift did not come because the circumstances changed. Her husband did not return. The financial difficulty did not resolve. The loneliness did not disappear. But she had moved from waiting for God to show up to recognizing that he had never left. That is the third sign. And here is the practice. When the silence is loudest, when you feel the least, you do not increase your spiritual activity. You do one specific thing. You speak to God exactly as though he is in the room. Not a formal prayer. Not a rehearsed liturgy. You speak, out loud if you can, and you say what is actually true for you in that moment, including the doubt, including the exhaustion, including the anger. Because real relationship can hold honesty. What it cannot survive is performance. The cost of this practice is vulnerability. And vulnerability before God, when you're not sure he's listening, is one of the hardest things a human being can do. But it is precisely that posture, that willingness to speak into apparent silence, that transforms faith from a theory into a lived reality. Now, before the fourth sign, I need to pause. Because if you've been watching this and you're in the middle of a season that is genuinely breaking you, if the silence has been going on longer than you know how to carry, I want you to do something right now. In the comments below, write your name. Just your name. Or if you prefer, just write prayer, one word. Because I read these comments, and I pray over them. And your name, or that one word, becomes part of a real prayer, not a performance, not a formula. You are not alone in this. And sometimes the most important thing is not to understand what God is doing, but to know that someone is standing with you while you wait for the answer. Write your name. I'll be there. The fourth sign that you are blessed is this. You have been given a desire for something that the world cannot satisfy. This one tends to surprise people, because it doesn't feel like a blessing. It feels like a problem. You have tried, really tried, to fill the emptiness with the things everyone else seems satisfied with. More comfort, more security, more noise, more connection, more success, and none of it lands with permanence. None of it holds. You reach a goal and discover the satisfaction lasts 3 weeks. You build something you've always wanted and find the wanting continues anyway. You get the thing, and the thing doesn't fix the thing. And you've been treating this as a defect, as restlessness, as ingratitude, as though something is wrong with you for not being able to just be satisfied with what's in front of you. But I want to reframe that for you completely. Augustine of Hippo, one of the great fathers of the church, wrote one of the most honest sentences in the history of Christian thought. He wrote, "Our heart is restless until it rests in you." That restlessness you feel, it is not a problem to fix. It is a compass pointing toward the only direction where the answer actually lives. The person who is fully satisfied with earthly comfort does not seek God, not because they are bad, but because they don't feel the need. The hunger has been suppressed. The signal has been silenced. But you cannot suppress it. You have tried. It comes back. That is not a curse. That is God leaving a door open inside you that no earthly thing can close. Here is the diagnostic question for this sign. In your most honest moments, not the moments you perform for other people, but the moments where it's just you and the silence, what is it that you actually want? Not more money, not more stability, not even more health. What is it that, if you could wake up tomorrow and have it, would make you feel that something had finally been restored? Most people, when they sit with that question long enough, arrive at the same place. Peace, real peace, not the absence of conflict, but the kind of interior settled certainty that does not depend on circumstances. That is what you were made for. And the fact that you cannot be fully satisfied without it, that is not your weakness. That is your design. The practice for this sign is a daily examination. Not long, 5 minutes. Before you sleep, you ask yourself one question: what did I use today to avoid the real hunger? Phone, food, work, entertainment, argument, noise. You are not condemning yourself for the answer. You are simply becoming honest about the pattern. Because the pattern is where the work is. And the work, done consistently, begins to reorder what you reach for when the hunger speaks. Now I need to tell you something about the fifth sign. Because some of you, when you hear it, are going to feel resistance. Real resistance. Not polite disagreement, but the kind of resistance that sits in your chest like a locked door. And I am asking you not to leave before you hear it. Because that resistance is not a signal that the fifth sign doesn't apply to you. It is a signal that it applies to you most of all. What I am about to tell you is what separates the person who talks about blessing from the person who actually lives inside it. It is not comfortable. It is not simple. And it will ask something specific from you that you may not feel ready to give. But ready is overrated. And what God is looking for from you right now is not readiness. Stay with me for the fifth sign. The fifth sign that you are blessed is this. You are being asked to trust God in a situation where trusting Him costs you something real. Not theoretical trust. Not trust in principle. Not the kind of trust that says, I believe God is good, while privately holding a backup plan for every scenario. Active trust. Trust that looks like a decision. Trust that other people around you can see and probably think is unwise. Let me be specific about what this means. It means trusting God's timing when your timeline has expired. It means staying in obedience when disobedience would be faster and probably easier. It means releasing control of an outcome that you have been white-knuckling for months or years. It means saying, out loud, before the evidence arrives, I believe God is good, and I trust Him here, even here. That is the highest form of faith, and it is not passive. It is one of the most active, most demanding, most courageous things a human being can do. Padre Pio used to say, to those who came to him in their darkest moments, something that disturbed them before it freed them. He would say, do not wish your cross away. Ask for the grace to carry it well. People heard that and felt disappointed. They came for relief. They went away with a call to endurance. But what Padre Pio understood, and what most of us spend years learning, sometimes too late, is that the removal of the cross is not the blessing. The grace to carry it is. Because the cross you carry with God, the one you do not drop, the one you do not trade for comfort, the one you bring to the altar every day and say, I don't understand this, but I trust you with it. That cross is shaping something in you that no smooth road ever could. It is shaping character. It is shaping depth. It is shaping the kind of faith that does not break when circumstances become unbearable, because it was already forged in unbearable circumstances. And I want to be direct with you now, because some of you have been waiting for God to remove the situation before you commit to trusting Him. You've been saying, in effect, God, when you fix this, I'll believe you are good. When you resolve this, I'll trust your plan. When this season ends, I'll be the person I know I'm supposed to be. But that is not faith. That is a conditional agreement. And God is not in the business of conditional agreements. He is in the business of transformation. And transformation does not happen in comfort. It never has. Not once in the entire history of the faith. Every person whose story you draw courage from, every saint, every martyr, every ordinary person who built something extraordinary with their life, they all passed through a season where trusting God cost them something concrete. Something they did not want to give. Something that felt like loss before it felt like gain. And the one consistent thing in all of those stories is this. They did not wait until they felt ready. They decided before the feeling arrived. So here is what I am asking you to do. Not tomorrow. Not when things get better. Now, pick the one area of your life where you have been holding the tightest. The one situation where you have been trusting yourself more than God. The one place where the backup plan has been more comforting than the prayer. And today, before you sleep tonight, you release it. Not in the sense that you stop caring. Not in the sense that you do nothing. But in the sense that you speak these words, or words like them, with honesty. God, I cannot see what you are doing here. I don't understand the timing. I don't understand why this is taking this long or costing this much. But I am choosing, right now, as an act of will, not as a feeling, to trust that you are present, that you are working, and that you are good. I release my grip. I keep my obedience. And I trust you with the outcome. That prayer, spoken honestly, even through doubt, even through exhaustion, is worth more than 1,000 prayers spoken in comfort. Because it cost you something. And what cost you something means something. To you and to God. Now here is the thing I want you to understand before we close. Everything you've heard today is not theory. It is not inspiration. It is not a collection of nice ideas about God and suffering. It is a map. A map back to the peace that you had before you began to believe that your circumstances defined your status before God. A map back to the certainty that you are seen, that you are chosen, that you are not being punished, but processed, not abandoned, held. The 5 signs are real. And if you have recognized even one of them in your life today, then what you are living is not a crisis of faith. It is a deepening of it. And deepening is not comfortable, but it is irreversible. Once you go deeper in God, you cannot fully return to the surface and be satisfied there. The hunger for depth stays with you. That restlessness stays. And that, as we said before, is not a problem. That is a direction. Let me ask you one more thing before you go. Have you found this channel helpful? Has something you heard here, today, or in another video, landed in a way that stayed with you? Has it shifted something, even slightly, in how you see what you're walking through? If yes, subscribe. Not as a favor to me, as a commitment to yourself. Because what is coming on this channel in the next weeks is going to go deeper than this, into the specific practices of the saints, into the concrete mechanics of prayer in dry seasons, into the question of what obedience actually looks like when it costs you something you didn't want to give. This is not content. This is formation. And formation takes time, consistency, and showing up even when you don't feel like it. Subscribe and bring someone with you. Because here is the truth I want to leave you with. You came to this video, at least in part, because something in your life has been hard. I don't know the details, but I know the weight. And I know that voice, the one that says you've been forgotten, that you've done everything right and still been left behind, that maybe God's goodness was never meant for someone like you. That voice is a lie, not a small lie, not a misunderstanding. A lie, a deliberate, targeted, calculated lie aimed at the one thing that could transform your life if it remained intact, your trust. Because a person who trusts God in the dark is dangerous, not to others, to the things that have been keeping them small. Dangerous to the fear that has been running the show. Dangerous to the version of themselves that decided long ago to shrink rather than risk. God is not trying to make your life easier. He is trying to make you someone who can handle what He has prepared for you. And what He has prepared, the depth of peace, the solidity of purpose, the unshakable foundation that does not move when the storm comes. You cannot receive it at the surface. You receive it in the deep water, in the hard seasons, in the moments that asked everything of you and found you still standing. Those moments are not punishments. They are invitations. And you are still here. That is the 5th sign. That is all 5 signs. And that is the answer to the question you've been carrying. You are not forgotten. You are being formed. In the next video, I am going to show you something that Padre Pio taught about what to do in the moment when God seems most absent, when the silence is loudest, when the prayer feels like it's hitting the ceiling, when you begin to wonder if continuing is even worth it. Because that moment, that exact moment, is not the end of something. It is the beginning of the deepest thing. Don't miss it. Subscribe and come back. And one more thing before I go. If you are walking through something right now, something that weighs on you, something you've been carrying longer than you thought you could, leave your name in the comments below. Just your name, or just the word prayer. Because I read them, I pray over them. And your name, written in faith even when faith feels small, is already an act of trust. You are not praying alone today. Shalom, my friend. Until next time.